Peace, everybody. I'm here today to talk about the tragic death of Trayvon Martin that occurred over a month ago out in Sanford, Florida. For one, I want to put it in a historical perspective. A lot of times we look at issues, kind of look at it through a vacuum, look at it as an isolated situation, when in fact these situations have occurred, throughout our history in this country, and not just in Florida, but they've occurred all over the United States. But particularly the history in Florida when it comes to vigilante justice is very scary. It's one that I feel like it needs to be touched on, and that's what I'm going to hope to do today. Trayvon Martin, a young man, we've seen pictures of him in a football jersey, we've seen pictures of him smiling, a young man who had his whole life ahead of him. His life was taken by a coward, self-appointed community watch captain. So we want to put his death in perspective and just to understand, how tragic his death was, and also how tragic, the death of so many young black men across America's death, was as tragic. And we don't want to, like I said, look at his situation in a vacuum. We want to put it in a perspective. We want to, have some dialogue about the issue of racial profiling. It's an issue that has hunted this country since its inception. It's an issue that, a lot of people, millions of black men across America are experiencing or have experienced. So, it's something that we just need to talk about in dialogue. And hopefully this video will give you a chance to, have some ideas to share with your friends and create that dialogue. The first thing I want to do is, like I said, put this in historical perspective. I want to talk about the death of Emmett Till. His death occurred in 1955. Emmett Till, at the time, was 14 years old. He was visiting some family down south. He apparently whistled at a white woman, and her husband and his brother had went into his uncle's house, dragged him out. They gouged his eyes out. They beat him up. They tortured him. They took a cotton gin fan, tied it to his head, and ended up drowning. He ended up drowning in a river because of the weight of the cotton gin. It was just too much for him to survive and to keep him afloat. And that simply happened because he was whistling at a woman. That's all he did. He didn't, kill anyone. He didn't threaten to hurt anyone. He didn't, fight anyone. This is just simply whistling, at a woman. And the people that killed him simply took justice into their own hands. They didn't allow the courts to do anything. They didn't allow the police to do anything. They felt like this is something they had to handle on their own. And this is exactly what we see happening, seen happen in Sanford, Florida. Individuals feeling like they need to take the law into their own hands and attack unarmed, innocent young men, children. The history in Florida, which Emmett Till situation didn't happen in Florida, and one thing that was significant about Emmett Till's situation is that his death spawned a national movement. It catapulted the civil rights movement. It's one of the pivotal moments in the civil rights movement. And hopefully with Trayvon Martin's death, his death will signify, a new day, a new era where racial profiling doesn't exist. It's something that we need to get put behind us because, it's very uncomfortable being targeted. I've been targeted. I felt I perceived, being targeted. And sometimes perception is reality, and it's a reality for a lot of young black males in America. Again, talking about Florida, one way vigilante justice was used by whites and by others to get retribution on oppressed peoples, whether it's Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, or whatever it may be, was through lynching. In 1934, there was a black male by the name of Claude Neal, 23 years old, from Florida, the town of Marianna. And he was accused of raping and killing a white lady. And he was arrested and placed in the jail for that. He never had the opportunity to stand trial. There was a group of 100 vigilantes that demanded that Claude Neal be released from jail, and they gave them a 12-hour notice that they'll be back for him. And what had happened was they ended up getting Claude Neal and torturing him. And this was a crowd of women, children, men, So they even had the news there to document the situation. And what had happened was, the first thing they did was that they cut his genitals off. And that was something that was very common in the Jim Crow eras, that, they would cut off the genitals, fingers, toes, ears, and keep them as souvenirs. Not only did they cut his genitals off, but they did cut off his fingers and toes. They stabbed him with sticks, knives, tortured him. They cut, his torso. They dragged him with a car. They burned him, and then they hung him. And then when the sheriff came down the next day to cut Claude Neal's damaged, battered body down, the people demanded that he be hung back on the tree. When they didn't get, what they wanted, a race riot ensued. They attacked black people to get retribution on the death of that young white girl that was never taken to trial for anyone even know if Claude did it or not. So that type of justice is one that's not new to this country. There was also a case in Rosewood. That was one movie that I watched. I remember watching as a kid that really just angered me, inflamed. Even if I watch a movie to the day, I get angry. I can't watch it. I can't finish it because just the pain, you can feel it. Even though it's a movie, it's dramatized, it has actors in there, you can still feel that pain, because we've heard stories from our grandparents, our parents, of the things they had to endure, the racism they had to endure, the discrimination, the taunting, the violence that they had to endure. And, it's just one of those movies that's tough to watch, but it's based on a true story. Rosewood was a town in Florida. A young man was lynched because a girl accused him of raping her when he didn't do it. And then eventually, that violence spread out. The black community was angered, that these lynchings occurred. There was a period of time where there was a peak of lynchings in Florida. And, the people fought back, and, 6 blacks ended up dying, 2 whites. The town of Rosewood was completely destroyed to the point people couldn't even move back in, because of this racial violence. The situation that happened in Mariana, the National Guard had to get called in. That's how bad the violence got. It got to the point where the National Guard had to come and defend these people because the local government, the state government, would not do anything to help them. And in Rosewood, it took 70 years for justice. One of the victims in 1993 had actually won a lawsuit against the state for not protecting her, not protecting the people of Rosewood, from these vigilantes, from this justice. Is it going to take 70 years for Trayvon Martin to get justice? It's not on my watch and not on your watch. We have to, not let this thing, fall off the news. A lot of times it's 24-hour news cycle. The news is on. It's all on the front of CNN, whatever newspapers it may be. And, after 24 hours, we forget about it. We're not going to forget about Trayvon Martin. Because if we forget about Trayvon Martin, we're forgetting about our brothers, we're forgetting about our nephews, we're forgetting about our sons. This is an issue, racial profiling, discrimination, killing unarmed people, whether it's police or individuals, is something that has to stop. The law that, they're using in Florida to justify Trayvon Martin's murder was the Stand Your Ground law, a.k.a. Shoot First law. There's also doctrines called the Castle Doctrine, which is something that's, pretty much in every jurisdiction in this country. And Stand Your Ground law is actually adopted by 28 states, and it's something to know. Being an individual living in those states, that, people have the right to use deadly force if they feel threatened. You have to know that in order to defend yourself and protect yourself from those type of individuals like Zimmerman. The clauses like Stand Your Ground, they also call it the line in the sand and the no duty to retreat. And these names sound like something out of a Clint Eastwood movie, like the Wild Wild West. Like there's no law here. There's nobody governing it. It's just individuals taking justice into their own hands. And I have nothing against people using, their First Amendment rights, using that right to defend themselves, to bear arms. I have no problem with that. But when there's laws on the books that allow individuals to circumvent those laws that protect us, and they're using these laws to harm people, then I do have a problem with that. And I feel that people, as individuals, whether you're black, Hispanic, or white, or whatever, if you feel threatened and you understand that people out there are being aggressive, are hunting you, you need to also take advantage of that right and bear arms to protect yourself and defend yourself against these racists, against these bigots, against these people, these super cops, these people that are taking justice into their own hands. We have to defend ourselves against this. And we can use dialogue, which I believe is always the first line of defense, is talking, communicating. But if it comes to the point where we feel threatened and we have to use deadly force, then by all means do so. Also, I like to talk a little bit about the value of a black life. What is the value of a black life today? I'm hearing all these stories, growing up, black men getting killed, getting shot, by police officers, unarmed. They have a wallet in their hand, cop thinks it's a gun, shoots them, and these cops end up getting acquitted, and there's no justice for the individual, and there's no outcry. Black people stand up. We get Jesse Jackson, the Rainbow Coalition, ACLU, these people out here, and it's crazy because these things continue to happen in different cities, different places, and cops are continually getting acquitted, individuals are continually getting acquitted, and there's no justice for the victims, and there's no justice for the family. Is a black life still worth 3/5 of any human being's life? Is that what our life is worth? 3/5? Now in 2012, is that what it's worth? We have to ask that question. We have to research, look at statistics, look at the rate of incarceration of black males. Look at the sentencing of black males. Look at the homicides. How many homicides, black on black violence? How many of those cases are actually going to trial? How many of them are people actually getting convicted of any of the crimes? We have to look at that and be mindful that racism is still alive. Kanye said sometimes they just be concealing it, and we have to be mindful of that. Being a young man, I want to eventually have a family, and if I have a son, I need to understand that the threat, still exists. I have to be conscious of it. I have to be mindful of it, because if I'm not, situations like Trayvon Martin's, situation like Sean Bell, will still occur. So we have to educate ourselves.